Church and abuse. Welcome along to the Pastor's Heart. Dominic Steele here, and a special edition today. My guests, Mez McConnell and Matthew Spandler Davidson, and Mez and Matthew, co-founders of Church in Hardplaces, an awesome ministry which really is about training and supporting Indigenous church leaders in poorer communities. Mez from Nisri in Scotland and Matthew from Bardstown in Kentucky in the US. And in Sydney this week presenting at the Church at Hardplaces conference, and then an elective on Friday afternoon for Acts29 and on the church and abuse. And gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
We're thinking abuse in the church. There's emotional abuse, there's sexual abuse, and there's spiritual abuse. But Mez, you've just finished this book, The Creaking on the Stairs, Finding Faith in God Through Childhood Abuse. It's really your story, but it's for everyone.
Yeah. So it's basically the story of my life. I was abused as a child between the ages of 2 and 13 by my stepmother, physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, also by neighbours, her friends as well. And I always wanted to write an evangelistic book that looked at the basic question: where was God when I was being abused? Or if God's so loving, why does he allow these terrible things to happen? Mm-hmm. And so, because we both come up against this topic in our ministry so much, I would say around 90% of the people in our community involved with our church have been abused in some way. And so it was a process, about 4 years before I finally put pen to paper. But I thought, right, let's write something that's pastoral and evangelistic, that helps people try and come to terms with what's happened to them.
And Matthew, sexual abuse is part of your narrative too?
Yeah, so growing up as a child in England until I was 9 years old, then I moved to Scotland. But growing up on a council estate, certainly suffered from abuse at the hand of a neighbour, sexual abuse, and also a family member. And so there's just part of my own story, part of my own upbringing, part of the way I viewed myself. And really, it's just later on in my life realized how deeply that affected me in more ways than perhaps I realized. So it's true. Just in our communities, in poor places, you have to be able to have a conversation about abuse, mental health, addictions. In so many ways these things are related, but you can't do ministry well in our context without having a good frame of reference for how to talk to somebody who's a victim or somebody who's a perpetrator, because we're living in community with them.
Rosaria Butterfield's described it as the most disturbing book that I've ever read, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is a little confronting, though, to open it up and Steve Timmis's name is on the inside page, the first page, really, of the book, and then just to be aware he's being forced to stand down this week as CEO of Acts29, and you guys must have thoughts on this, because it's all everyone's talking about in the Acts29 movement this week.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. Do you know what? I didn't even realise you just said that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
That's how much notice I take of the blurbs.
Right.
So that would have been blurbs long before this.
Yeah.
This week's stories come out. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
About
Of course. And I just bought the book this morning.
Yeah. Also, I think what this book is dealing with is not specifically what Steve's been accused of, which is spiritual abuse, right? Bullying, abuse of authority. This book is specifically around hardcore specifically children, sexual, physical, emotional abuse. And so,
it's a totally different topic.
Yeah, it's a totally different topic, and it is slightly awkward for me now, obviously, that he's blood, but there's nothing I can do about it. The book's already out.
Yeah.
And Steve's case is completely separate.
Yep. And to the point of us being here doing a workshop with Acts29 on abuse, obviously there's we talked about this earlier. It's so it raises some questions, some eyebrows. elephant in the room. How can Acts29 be having an event on abuse when its leader is being accused of abuse of authority in the workplace and having a heavy-handed approach to staff or in the life of his church as well? And so, but for us, it's...
And we should be clear, I invited you to come and talk to us.
Separate from that.
Totally unaware that you were speaking on abuse this week. And then I rang up to kind of network and discuss with you about what we would talk about, and the elective was on abuse. And you said, well, we're going to have to stand up before a couple of hundred people and talk about it on Friday, and people are going to be asking questions. And so should we shy away from it, or should we answer the questions? And we said, well, no, let's put the questions and ask them, but also talk about the book and some of the other stuff you're doing.
We don't want to take away from... Number one, there's a very big, important, significant conversation to be had around abuse in the life of a local church. Spiritual abuse is a part of that. When we do a longer seminar, which we're going to do in the UK, several one-day seminars, one of our topics is abuse of authority, spiritual abuse in the life of the church. So that is a legitimate, important topic for us to be discussing.
And you're going to give a seminar on that next month and have to answer questions.
And we will have to answer these questions.
But again, all those seminars were in place.
Planned. So it's not. So what I'm saying is, this is not reactionary. It's not us trying to get in the front foot to news or accusations that have been made. This is part of who we are. It's part of our ministry. It's part of, in fairness, what Acts29 has been about as well, in the sense of supporting this ministry and our work. And so we've been as much taken aback by some of the news and the developments over the last week as you have been. And so we're not doing this in reaction against anything.
And I'm told two things. One, that a number of friends who are in Acts29 have described to me a significant culture change in the Acts29 movement over the last 5 or 6 years, kind of since the Driscoll scandals of 5, and that's been your experience as well?
Yeah, so I didn't lead my church into Acts29 when Driscoll was president of Acts29 for that reason, that I didn't, just the style of leadership, the culture, is something that I just didn't appreciate or really have much time for. What you have seen in Acts29 in the last few years, 5-6 years, is certainly a shift in emphasis, a change in culture, more of a humility approach. And I think that's the experience of most members of Acts29. So Acts29...
Well, certainly the Aussie guys that I've spoken to have said there has been a culture shift towards humility. You don't have this kind of... it's much more humility, graciousness. At least that's from the members. That's a everyday members' experience. Now that's not to discredit the experience of staff or employees or members of a particular local church, but for most of the members of Acts29, our experience has not been a heavy-handed approach, a domineering culture. It's been one of love and grace and encouragement and support towards us. And so when you go from a family of churches gone from 300 to 800, most of the members of Acts29 today have joined since Driscoll, and so have come into. So that's why when we hear this news that came out last week, I think there's genuine surprise. There's genuine shock. I don't think it is reflective necessarily of the individual members of Acts29. I think it is reflective of a particular church and a particular culture. And there are lessons to be learned, and there's wrong that's been done, and there's, it's not going to be resolved just by changing the leader or bringing in a new CEO. I think we have to really ask the hard questions about accountability, about transparency, about the employment grievance process. They're legitimate questions we've got to ask, but I don't want that to discredit or take away from real, meaningful changes that have happened over the last 5 years in Acts29, particularly globally. So that's. It'd be sad if that was the response. Is people just give up on Acts29 altogether or make assumptions about every member of Acts29 because of this.
But to be fair, you can't blame them, right?
No,
because I only joined
because it's the perception.
Acts29 because of Steve Timmis, because Mark Driscoll. We never went anywhere near it when Mark Driscoll was the boss, because he was just a mayor, wasn't he? And then. So I have mixed emotions really, because I joined because of Steve Timmis. So it's a bit of a bolt out of the blue for me personally. I don't know much about this culture change that you're talking about because I'm post Driscoll. Do you understand what I mean? So a lot of the guys that I know are solid, good
pursuing godliness and humility.
This whole let's buy craft beer and watch cage fighting. Do you know all that nonsense? It's like
that's just not been our experience.
Yeah.
You know, in the time we've been there.
But I do think that people have a legitimate right to ask us questions about the situation.
So
there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
What did you make of it when you heard the announcement?
I mean, my heart sank. That's the first thing. The second thing is I have got Steve's obviously a friend of mine, and I want to support my friend pastorally. That's not the same as excusing what he has or what he may have done or may not have done. Also, I've got friends on the other side who've made complaints about him, and so there's obviously some truth to the situation, or at least if it's not truthful, there is a growing swell of people standing up, and I'm suggesting they're not standing up for no reason at all. I think Steve's acted well in his home church, and he stood down from a crowded house. Whether that was prompted or unprompted, no, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I'm going to assume, knowing Steve, it was unprompted. And they're bringing in an independent body, I think, to look at the crowded house and how that worked. And then the Acts29 scenario, we don't know yet. There's not a meeting actually until next month with the leaders to discuss this and the ramifications. So we're in this sort of vague, no man's land sort of thing. But let's not forget there's people hurting here who feel they've been victimised and bullied and abused and manipulated, and we've got to care for them and make sure they felt heard and not sidelined, which appears, at least from things I've read, that's been done historically. People have been shut down and made to...
It doesn't sound good,
no.
The way this 2016... or the 15 people.
The 5 guys, the non-disclosure stuff. That sounds really bad to me.
Yeah.
But I got to get in it. We've yet to get in a room with leaders, look them in the face, and say what's going on.
What happened?
So we know as much as you know in that sense.
Although
about what happened.
one of them was Leon Crump, who's speaking this. I mean, the same conference as you. The next 2 days.
So the point is, we don't know. We're not fully aware of all the details of A29. The situation that we'll find that out later. Crowded houses, that's being dealt with in-house by the church, who seem to be, as far as I'm aware, have acted quickly on it. So there's hurting people on all sides, and and again, here's the problem with this culture, with cancel culture. What I'm about to say now, people will take this as I'm taking sides, but I'm not. But let's not forget that there's a man here who's been in ministry for 40 years, has made a great contribution, particularly to British evangelicalism. Has made a great contribution to A29 and the world mission of church planting, and almost overnight his credibility's gone. Publishers are pulling his books. I mean, we've had to pull one of his books. His whole ministry's been ripped apart from him. Now, some people might be watching this going, well, good, he deserves it, and maybe so, maybe not. But the point is, he's still a brother in Christ. He's got a wife, he's got children, he's got family who are just as much affected by everybody on social media jumping on with a hot take, whatever they call them, and so there's no winners in this scenario. And so right now, I think it's hard for us to make any clear statements because the smoke's not yet cleared, if you understand what I mean.
Because the tragedy of the whole situation is, though, 5-6 years ago, there were individual members of staff who would have had that same experience when they were let off and removed and fired and so forth. So there's hurt and there's pain and there's heartache.
And there's sin.
And there's sin
everywhere.
But I don't want that to belittle some of my friends who I know have made complaints about him, because I support them. But I also, as a brother in Christ, want to think, well, how do we support him as well?
You've spoken to him?
I've exchanged texts with him, messages with him,
What are you praying for Steve, and what are you praying for those who've made the complaints?
I always pray for Steve and Janet and the family anyway, but I mean, I'm just praying for clarity, for truth, for if there is sin, that it would be he would take responsibility for where he needs. I'm assuming he's made errors. I'm assuming he's made some grievous errors. I'm assuming he's made some decisions he probably regrets. I'm assuming those things because 20 years in ministry, I've done those things. I want to see some sort of sense of repentance. I want protection for him and his wife, and so I'm praying for that. That as we act swiftly, particularly on the side of the victims, and that there'll be justice there, but at the same time that alongside justice there'll also be some mercy and grace, that we don't completely just excoriate a guy and he's like that's the end of him.
One overriding lesson to all of this is if somebody makes an accusation that they're being bullied, manipulated, ill-treated or abused, the worst thing you can do is silence that person. You need to give them at least the decency and the legitimacy of hearing them, because if you don't, then nobody else will voice that. You then create a culture of fear and a culture of intimidation. And so, when you've got
which sounds like that's what happened with the 2000 the complaints a few years ago.
That's what I'm saying, which is true of every situation of abuse. So when we're talking about somebody who makes an accusation of child abuse, even if the accusation were to be false, you don't want to silence them or not listen to the accusation for fear of it creating a culture of silence and intimidation within the broader church or the broader institution. And so I think there are broader lessons to be learned, just as an organisation. That applies to a local church.
There are polity lessons to be learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Accountability.
One man should never have exclusive power, I think, over even over a local church, over a ministry that big, because we're sinners. We're not perfect. And I think there should be checks. I think if any lessons come out of this is, one, they've got to be gospel lessons. We've got to take people seriously, particularly those who've been victims of bullying, intimidation. But I think also it's we've got to have clearer processes in place for if people do need to come forward. We've got to act quickly, but we've got to act as Christians, not out of anger, not just reacting, not trying to. My worry today, and this is not just a thing of Acts29, but generally, is that as soon as something happens, the PR machine rolls out to try and do damage limitation, and it's like I think that's not helpful. Well, I'm not suggesting that's happened.
Well, in your seminar on Friday, you sent me your notes for your seminar on Friday, and
this is a conversation on my book has turned into this very thing we said we didn't want to talk on.
One of the lines in your seminar is, we must be sure that we're not more concerned about protecting the reputation of the church over the well-being of victims.
Yes.
And so I think that's our immediate response as leaders, as elders. Often, if there's accusation made, is we need to bunker down, keep this in-house, protect the reputation of the church or the individual concerned. And I understand that reaction. It makes sense to want to have that reaction, particularly if you don't know the truth or you don't, at this point, able to discern the truth. You want to keep things in-house, keep it closed, out of concern with the reputation. There's no winners in that. I think the opposite is always true. Actually, if you have transparency, openness, you respond very quickly by taking seriously legitimate accusations or any accusation, to respond quickly. And so if our motivation, if I'm an elder board or if I'm a board of a global ministry, and my motivation when I hear an accusation of abuse is, hold on, we need to protect this ministry, then that's a bad starting point. The motivation must be, we need to care well for a victim, and we need to be taking steps here to make sure we are caring well for a potential victim of abuse.
Now, one of the people who's a victim of the Crowded House Acts29 thing has said to me this week that they feel like Matt Chandler's video, his initial video announcing Timmis's transition, was about limiting brand damage and doing all of the things that you've just critiqued. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us as outsiders who are not part of the room. It does sound a little bit like legal speak.
Spin doctoring.
Like, we're trying to And so again,
The transitioning land.
Yeah, rather than actually, I mean, the first announcement was we're transitioning him out. He's been a great guy, all that kind of thing, but not actually acknowledging any problem. Yeah. And then after the Christianity Today article, actually we've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
It didn't feel transparent.
There is nobody looks good.
Yeah.
In that.
No, let's be clear. That it was bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And so
and I've said that.
So we're
to people.
It's
the people who matter. But again, let's not look. I'm not going to defend Matt Chandler, but then I will as well. You know, he's reacting to events that happen really quickly, and so
and under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, huge pressure. And then there are things that we possibly don't know about, like we don't know what the legal agreement behind the scenes, whether he was allowed to say anything about Steve or whether Steve could say. So I'm not making excuses, but I think it was poorly done in one sense. It's just like it's a transition. Oh no, the next day it's about abusive leadership. I don't think they were trying to hide anything. I just think that two things got conflated here. Some complaints were made about him by some Acts29 guys, and some of them are historical from 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. But this article came out, which is about his local church, not about Acts29. And these things came together, and I think the sort of day after each other. And I think then Acts29 think, well, hang on a minute, the complaints that are being made here, actually, but the similarities to have been made here.
Yeah, so, we got to deal with this. Yeah.
And so I think Matt's done. He's come out. He's been honest about it.
He's in many ways owned that, and so I don't think we're here saying that there's been a cover up or anything here. I think there's a perception of that, certainly because of a lack of transparency or openness. But we don't know what's going on in the room. We don't know what is provoking that. There is certainly a movement of events, a pace of events, things happening out with the control of a board that have huge implications for the organisation as it relates to a particular local church. And so. Yeah.
I listen. Matt Chandler, like I said, I'm not busy mates with him. We don't high five and hang out. You know what I mean? But I've met him. I know him. Met him a few times. My impression of him is he's a godly guy who loves the Lord. Yeah. And so what I don't want to do is attribute bad motivation to what he's doing. Yeah. What's happening is people who don't like Acts29 anyway, don't like Matt Chandler's brand of Christianity anyway. They, I think, are just using these events
to pile in
with an agenda they already had to a guy. I think is Matt Chandler perfect? No, he's not. But I tell you what, if it would have been me in his place, I don't know if I would have acted any better or any graciously. He's a godly, gracious guy. Is my experience of Matt, and I just think things. The problem today is things happen with breakneck speed online. It's trial by Twitter. I think they just.
I mean, and I guess to come back to your thing, you did talk about transparency and openness before. We do need to remember, don't entertain an accusation against an elder unless two or three witnesses. Yep. And as somebody who's been sued for defamation and then found to have been in the right, one of the things that worries me is allegations being thrown around in the public sphere willy-nilly, and we know the Christian leader's not going to sue because they don't want to take the thing before the unbeliever, but other people are taking it before the unbeliever.
And so it's just an impossible position to be in. And so I know it's easy then to make assumptions about integrity and about motivation, which I think just be very cautious about jumping to those assumptions about a man's integrity. I'm talking here about the board and about Chandler and the video that came out. I think it is. I think you got a godly man who we can trust, who speaks with integrity, trying to manage moving events as best he can. But I think that we would both say probably they made a bad first step in the first response to it. Yeah. We're hopeful that the steps that we take beyond this point learn some of those lessons about being pastorally sensitive, walking with a sense of openness, transparency, and with love and concern for people who have been hurt.
And let's remember that Steve has not made a public statement yet.
No.
So we don't know which of these allegations are true, which of them are not true.
We're all just working on what we've seen.
They may all be true.
Public media.
there may be a few of them are true. There'll certainly be people with access to grind who got, listen, we work in Christian ministry, who maybe they will let go on the original thing, who will have not like the way things are run or done. I'm not minimising victims here or genuine victims, but we don't know because the only people speaking are the media, the talking heads people. Acts29 have made vague statements. There's not that much detail in the statements. And Steve, for all intents and purposes, and known only to himself, Crowd House have made a statement. It's on their website about what they intend to do. And Steve, for the most part, has kept quiet. And again, we don't know the reason for that. So lots of stuff is speculation.
But
it's not to say lots of it's untrue. Do you understand the point of that?
Yeah. I mean, we've heard one side, hadn't heard the other, that kind of thing.
I think something that's potentially positive out of this, something that is a good conversation to be had about pastoral authority, about ecclesiology, about accountability within the local church. When does shepherding become manipulative? When does leadership become abusive or controlling? And I think
I don't know if you've reflected back on this, but I remember when Total Church came out as a book, and I had all sorts of uneasy feelings about some of the things in that book. In fact, I had Tim Chester here last year, and I asked him the question, have you written anything that you regret? And I didn't put it to him at the time, but in my mind I was thinking about Total Church. And I'm just wondering if some of that intensive relationship stuff that they were talking about had great positives, but could open up to allow this kind of thing to fester.
So we would say that when you have that intensive relationships, those are good things. Those are good things to aspire to. I think biblically, New Testament, you certainly see intense level of relationships, but it's done within the safety of strong ecclesiology, of godly, faithful leadership who are accountable to their members. And so it's not a controlling thing. It's very much a mutual relationship.
Because at my church, we would have strong.
Yep, very strong.
Very strong dynamics in terms of how we do life together, how we do evangelism, how do we decide. I mean, it's not like
it's one-to-one accountability, discipline.
A few church meetings a week. It's every single day of the life of our life. But I thought about Total Church. I thought about Everyday Church as well. But then it's easy. But then I was also thinking, but it's easy hearing the allegations now to read back that into the book and see meaning that's not there.
Yep.
If you know what I mean by that.
I mean, and I'm sure lots of people would be.
I mean, I mean, I can't remember much about Total. I preferred Everyday Church, which is a more modern one.
I didn't read that. I didn't like Total Church.
Which is the same thing. So now I know what people will be saying, but I think you're right. I don't think there's anything wrong with an intensity of community relationship, but I do think, at least from an outsider's perspective, and Matt Dever would love us for this, but it's true that polity
it's so important.
It's so important. If you just got one, if you're just sort of one guy, elder rule, bishop that leads everyone, and that's a dangerous place to be. And we've seen that with the amount of high-profile leaders who've fallen tend to have been. We've got elders, but really what they mean is that they're there.
They're there.
The elders do what they're bidding. And
it comes back to what we're saying. You don't want to abandon something that is good because it's imperfect. And so I think there is something good here to be pursued, which is strong biblical community. We're living life together. We're pursuing that together. And the elements of both those books that speak to that. I think where it falls short significantly is the issue of biblical church membership, the issue of biblical leadership, Christ-like eldership who are accountable to each other, so that these incidents of abusive authority, they cannot stand because the members can speak against it, can have a voice to speak against it. The challenge is you read a book like Total Church and you think, well, we don't need the church in a sense, we just need the relationships, we just need the sense of community.
And if you just have all those little communities, where is the church? We are the church. Where is there any sense of eldership?
That is the danger, which leads to the very things that we have seen, or at least have been accusations of. Because you have the absence of accountability. If the authority rides in one very dominant person, then it can, certainly the potential there is for that to become very controlling, very abusive.
And that, let's be clear, we're not making those assumptions about Steve Timmis.
Nope.
There may be the accusations, but right now there's no real clarity.
Yeah.
Now, in this book, as you talk about the child abuse, you come back to penal substitutionary atonement is absolutely key. And that seems to be a recurring theme for you. Do you want to just talk to that?
Yeah, well, it's one of the keys. I mean, I think the key is the absolute sovereignty of God.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, did God allow my child abuse to happen or not? Did he permit it? What's your answer?
My answer is yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Or the answer is no, therefore something was out with his control. So, you know, so it's absolute sovereignty. You've got to go there. And the book fights that.
What do you do with that? How do you fight it?
The book is my fight against that. What does that mean then?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to understand, well, can God permit that? Why would he permit it to me? Why me? Why not permit it to someone else? Why did that person get away with it and not? Do you know, all the questions you get. And so the book wrestles with that. I'm not going to answer it. You can read it yourself.
Yeah.
Buy it. Well, you've just bought me a copy.
Yeah.
Do you know, I bought this copy this morning and Mez said, can I give it to him?
Yeah. So I'm going to take it back.
This is the marketing strategy
This is my
of Mez.
sales technique.
I go around buying books that he's written to give back to him.
To answer your question on penal substitutionary atonement, why is it important? I'll tell you why it's important. Is because we all know that the critics of PSA would say it's, what you're advocating is cosmic child abuse. There's no way a holy God would do that to his sinless son, etc. And they've missed the whole force of why penal substitutionary atonement is so dear to me as an abuse sufferer. Well, to us, right? And that is, Jesus went through more humiliation than we went through. He faced more rejection than we. He in his final hours, there was no compassion or mercy or grace shown to him. He was rejected, alone, the whole lot. And the big fat winner that brought it to bear in my life and brought it to bear passionately was, I was a victim. There's no doubt about that. I was an innocent victim, you know, as are all people, regardless of their children or how they're being abused. They're victims being operated by people and or forces out with their control. But Jesus volunteered for this. So not only was his abuse greater than mine, infinitely far greater than mine in every way, but he also went willingly to the cross. That's the beauty of the depth of the pastoral key in terms of, okay, I might not understand why, and I still don't. One of my answers is, here's my answer, why does God permit it? I do not know. But here's what I know about him.
Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Cool.
Thank you.
My guests on the Pastor's Heart today are Mez McConnell and Matthew Spandler Davidson, and of course they are the founders of Church in Hardplaces and also the 20 Schemes. And you've been listening to the Pastor's Heart. Next week we talk evangelism and evangelism strategies, and whether you go the course, the individual evangelism, all those kind of things. And we'll look forward to your company on the Pastor's Heart next week.